All right. Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of Faith Fitness Joy. My name is Rochelle Renee, and I am your host. I am also a coach and healer. And today I have a very powerful episode for you on Faith Fitness Joy. Today I'm talking about faith. So the title I've given this episode of Faith Fitness Joy is The Nature of Moving Through a Leap of Faith and some tips for navigating it. And I have just been in a very difficult to describe state all day today, a very good one, I would say. And I am literally like in the midst of walking out of a valley that I've been moving through in this current season that I've been in of walking in faith. And so God has been speaking to me a lot today. God has been moving through me a lot today and in my life. He has been for, pretty much since I took this current leap, but I mean, just in a very different, very powerful, very big way today. And so one of the things that I felt led to talk about today as a result of that is to kind of just break down what a leap of faith looks like and sort of this process that I have come to kind of identify from not just my current walk in faith that I'm in the middle of right now, but I've done this many times now. And there's been many things that I've learned in all of my other walks in faith as well as this one. And also, I've just kind of come to see that there's sort of this process, I guess you could say, that you move through. Now, while every leap of faith, if you will, is different and it's going to be different for everyone, I think there are certain components of like taking a leap in faith that we will experience, and we may not move through these in a linear fashion or in the same order for everyone, but the things I've written down that I want to walk through today and just kind of outline like what this looks like, and then also have some tips for navigating it, because I feel like a lot of times we don't really hear people talk about it that much, or at least in my experience, it may be that I just didn't find anything that had laid things out in a sort of practical way or really kind of helped me with those moments when you're in that valley and God is being quiet and you just feel really lost, and you're at that point where you're just like really struggling with the fear, and you're really questioning yourself and you're questioning God a little bit, and you may feel very lost. And for me, I didn't seem to find anything that really helped me navigate that. I really had to kind of figure it out on my own. And I do think that is a big part of doing this, but I want to give you some tips today that I think will be very helpful for you if you are about to take a big leap of faith, or if you're currently in that valley right now and you're just like, what the heck am I going to do? Or how do I get myself through this? How do I move through this? Because a lot of times too, you'll hear people say certain things, and they just make it sound kind of like so simple, oh, just go pray, or oh, just go into meditation. And that's not really helpful, and it's not enough. You might need, maybe some more than that. So that's what I'm hoping to provide for you today. So I've talked about many of these, and maybe not particularly directly as having been like a leap of faith or a season of faith per se. But I've had many, I don't know, times, I guess you could say, in the last 10 years in particular, 10 to 12 years, that I have been like in a leap of faith of some sort. And so I've learned a lot from that. So I've been in the valley many times, what I call the pits, because a lot of times it can feel very dark. It can feel very terrifying even, and it can be very lonely. So based on the current one, well, let me back up a little bit. So some of the other times that I've done this, the first big one, at least the first one that I really kind of saw this way and drew a lot from, was when I went through my divorce. So that was a big one. And then another really big one was when I moved from my lifelong home in California out here to Montana, where I am now. I have been here less than 2 years, and I am continuing to move through a lot of things as a result of that leap of faith. And then there's been My more recent one where God called me to leave my job and go all in on this business that I'm building and have been building um, and moving through all of that. And then there's been other things that have been woven through all of this as well. And I feel he's asking me right now to go back to kind of what started this for me, because I think this is a big point of the whole thing. Um, is to be really mindful of what you pray and what you ask him for. Like when you're asking him to, so for example, he's taking me back to probably about 10 years ago, maybe, yeah, something like that, maybe a little bit, maybe more like 8 years, when I asked God to refine me. And I didn't really have a very good understanding of what that meant at the time that I prayed that prayer. And having gone through God's fire of refinement multiple times now, because it is an ongoing process and it continues over time. Um, I don't know if I would have, I don't know if I would have prayed that. Which is probably why things he takes you through things the way he does. So, and the reason I say that is because a lot of this requires that you are able and willing and open to take really good, long, hard looks at yourself and really face some challenging, hard truths about yourself, and be very willing to hold that mirror up and look at it and really confront whatever may come up and be willing and open to changing it, because it's just growth. It's just improvement. But it's a very challenging journey. It's very much a transformative process, a deep, deep and deeply transformative process. And now I understand why there's that term, that you're going through the fire of refinement, because it's very much what it feels like. So all that being said, it is well worth it. I do not regret having stepped into the season I'm in now. I wouldn't take any of it back, because it's taught me plenty, and I would not be where I am and who I am right now if I hadn't done that. So it's it's well worth it. But I also have come to understand why it is called the straight and narrow, because it's not for everybody, and a lot of people are not able to or willing to do it because it is very hard. So all that said, I want to start by just walking through kind of what the process, for lack of a better word, is, of a leap of faith looks like. So from kind of the leap itself, or actually right before you take the leap, to kind of coming through the valley. So the very first thing is that you will feel that nudge from God. You will get that calling. You will start to, and this can look all kinds of different ways. You might just feel it. You might just start to kind of have it drop in your mind. Suddenly you've got this idea to do something, and you're entertaining this idea, and you just can't seem to shake the feeling or the thought of it, and you feel more and more drawn to it, even though it scares you. And the more you think about it, the more emotions you start to feel about it. In some cases, you might feel good, positive feelings of excitement and um, optimism about it, and you really want to go forward with it. It might feel like a stretch, but yet it's also something you really want. And then you might also start to feel some fear and anxiety or doubt about it, especially as you get closer to thinking about actually taking action towards it. So that's the first thing that will happen, is you'll have that nudge and the calling from God. The second thing is then you're going to get hit with that fear and the doubt, which is kind of what I was just talking about, right? So, and this is going to look like, did I hear that correctly? Like you're going to start to doubt that your intuition, or that nudge, or that feeling that you've had to, take this leap of faith and do this thing. And that's partly because, or at least what I've come to experience in my own walk, is you start to get emotionally invested in the thing, the idea, the call. And then you really want to do it, and you want to like take the leap. But the more you start to develop those feelings of desire for it, and basically like wanting to do it, that's when you start to get into the fear, and starting to feel anxious, and the doubt starts to creep in, because now you're actually thinking of doing it. So that's when subconscious is going to start sounding the alarm bells and trying to keep you safe, and throw all these different doubts and fears up around at you. The third thing is then then you might shrug it off. You might tell yourself, no, I'm not going to do that. I didn't hear that right. That's not for me. That was just some wild idea I had. So then you will have that calling will start to get louder, and the nudge will start to get stronger, and God will work through other people to make the nudge a little bit stronger, to make the call a little bit louder. In my case, in my more recent case, there were some people in my job that I was in that just really did not want anything to do with me, did not, just, and that thing, just like the heat kind of turned up around that, if you will. And it just was getting more and more intolerable. And that nudge kept getting louder and louder. And he even started to throw like time frames in there. So there will be different ways, but the call will get louder and the nudge will get stronger, to where you're at the point where you're like right there on that ledge and you're looking at this leap you're about to take. And you're starting to think, okay, can I actually take this leap? So that's the fourth thing. You're at the decision point of taking the leap. You're either going to take the leap or you're not. So assuming you're going to take the leap, because that's where the rest of this process kicks in, you take the leap and you get this instant mix of extreme excitement and thrill and exhilaration, and like you're really optimistic and looking forward to what's ahead and all of that, because now you've got the good feelings pumping around about like, oh, I did it. Okay, yeah, I took the leap, I answered the call, kind of a thing. Depending on the situation. Now, if this is a more challenging situation, like in the case of my divorce, it was more like a relief. I had an extreme sense of relief about it. And almost like an assurance, a feeling of like assurance about the decision. So that's number 5, is when right after that, in the wake of the decision, you will start to get confirmation or affirmation of your decision. So in my more recent decision, it was like up until like when I actually went and talked to my boss, until all the way through after when I left. Like a series of things happened that were just, there was no denying that God was saying like, yes, this is the right decision. You've done the right thing. Trust this process, trust what you've been called to do, trust that I'm leading you this way. And it was in abundance. Like this last time was the most, like as close to a neon sign that God will ever get. Versus other times in my past where it wasn't quite that obvious, but still there's always enough of it that it's God saying, yes, you have made the right decision. The 6th thing is, like I said, then you're going to have this excitement and euphoria and optimism. You're going to feel really good about it, or you're going to feel relief, and you're going to feel like maybe hopeful about where you're heading. Then number 7 is, after some time, you're going to run into some sort of a challenge or an obstacle, or maybe even a little bit of a storm. And then this is going to lead you to start questioning. You're going to be questioning your decision. You're going to be questioning God. You're going to be questioning life. This could even look like a dark night of the soul. I've been through a few of those as well. So it depends. It kind of, like I said, it's not necessarily linear. So there can be different things that come up that put you in this place of like, oh crap, what have I done? I shouldn't have done this. Like, is this really the right decision? It may even be like, look like nothing's working. And this is where you have to start working the faith muscle, so to speak. This is kind of like your first, I hate to call it a test, but I guess for lack of a better term, we'll go with that. And this is when it's really like, you have to kind of, get to this place of like, okay, no, I'm going to go back to when God affirmed that I made the right decision. I'm going to trust that. And this is just an obstacle. I can get through this. I'm going to navigate this. It's okay. And you have to like kind of get to this point of deciding that you're going to persevere and you're going to push through it and you're going to be okay. And then you're going to hit a storm, where it is, this has especially been the case in my current walk, but I remember going through this in the wake of my divorce as well. I remember I felt like I was in this bizarre waking dream all the time. I remember it just felt like my life was unrecognizable, and I was in this constant state of discomfort and disarray. And I so desperately just wanted things to feel normal and stable again, but nothing did. And I'm very much have been in that place in this current walk as well. And it is a very challenging place to be. However, when you are staying close to God in this time and you pray and you're like really leaning on Him and relying on Him in the midst of that storm, He will give you this supernatural peace that I cannot describe. And the only thing I can liken it to is it's almost like if you're deaf or something, like you're like somebody's turned the sound off, but you're standing in the middle of a tornado or a hurricane and you see all this stuff swirling around you, and you know it should be really noisy and really terrifying, but somehow you feel safe and okay. So it's kind of like that's the best way I can describe it anyway. So He will give you a supernatural peace. He will give you these supernatural, I don't know what else you call it, all strength, peace, um, resilience. He will give you what you need at the point to navigate that storm and to move through it. Then the next thing, because at this point you're going to be like, okay, I'm out, I'm done. Like this was a mistake. My bad, God. I overestimated myself. Like, I cannot. Like this is too much. Well, that is the point of no return, and you want to go back really bad, but you can't. There's no way to go back. You can't, because everything that you just left, this whole like whatever is back there where you started your walk from, where you took that leap off of, it's gone. It is no more. And now you are too far down the path to go back. And the only choice you have at this point is to go forward. And I feel like that's no accident on God's part. I feel like that He times it that way. It happens this way because otherwise you would just go back. You would never finish the journey. So that's the point of no return. And then this is where you get to surrender phase one, I call it, because at least in my case, surrender happens in layers. So this is surrender phase one, where you realize you're at the point of no return and you are entering the valley, but you don't really know you're entering the valley yet. You just know you've hit the point of no return. You have no idea what you're doing or how you're going to proceed. And that you don't have any choice except to rely on God at this point, because there's no other way you're going to get through this. You need that extra that He can provide you. So that's when you finally like completely start to surrender. It's like, okay, God, all right, I thought I was surrendering to you. I thought I was like moving in faith, but now I realize that I've still been trying to be in charge. I've still been trying to grab the wheel here and there. So all right, I'm going to let you drive. I clearly don't know how to do this, so you take over from here. So then you will hit another storm, or the intensity of the storm that you've been moving through will turn up a bit. And now you are like that old poster from back in the 90s or whatever it was, when the little kitten is clinging onto a rope by like its little pinky claw toe nail. Or you're like, the wind is super strong and it's trying to blow you away, and you're like clinging onto this twig like for dear life, hoping that the twig doesn't break. This is like kind of the point where you're still trying to cling on to stuff, but you don't. It's so subconscious and so much of a almost automatic response because you just don't know what else to do. And so you're grasping for these things to cling to, because it's the only sense of stability and safety you can find for yourself, even though it's a false sense of stability and safety. And ultimately that twig is going to break. You're going to lose your grip with your toenail or whatever you're clinging on to. So this is where you get to the 13th part of it, which is stripping away of those last remnants. Now, these remnants, which is what you're clinging to, there can be different, there can be a multitude of them. There could just be a few of them. It could be bits and pieces of all of these or a few of them. One of them is relationships. So people that you are keeping in your life for whatever reason, even though it's not serving you to do so, or the relationship itself is not serving you and you have evolved past that relationship, and where you're going, that relationship cannot sustain or be sustained because that person can't come with you where you're going. It's just, they're just not part of this part of your journey or whatever that the case may be. And these are often the relationships we cling to because they're familiar, and because we don't really want to be entirely alone, even though we're not, because technically God is there with us, but we're looking for that human person to cling to and to give us that sense of stability and comfort and familiarity when we're in this season of like where everything feels completely upside down and in chaos. The other thing that you might be clinging to, one of these last remnants that will start to be stripped away, are stories and beliefs. So things that you've been telling yourself, and this is tricky, and this is a little bit of what I've been talking about with mindset in recent episodes around these different sneaky ways that our mind will mess with us, and we often can't even see that that's what's happening. Because again, it's like there's the story, the limiting belief in the mind, but then it's like this belief, and it feels so real and valid that that's why it's tricky, because you can't see what's happening. You can't see how your own mind is like working against you to kind of keep you stuck, to kind of keep you in that safety zone, because your subconscious mind does not like the unknown. And another thing that needs to be stripped away, the last remnants of what will be stripped away at this point in time, is your ego. Your ego must go. It cannot go with you in this journey. If you're going to walk by the Spirit, the ego has got to be stripped away completely. But this is, one of those things that probably one of the last things to completely go. And there's always like little remnants of it that are still clinging on or that we're clinging on to that need to go. And another example is things that you give, things that give you a false sense of stability or control. So again, these are like the things that we're hanging on to, things that maybe you keep trying to do. So in my case, again, since I'm in a season of having been called out of my job and I'm working on my business, there's been times where I'm like, okay, I need to find a job. I need to like get out there or I need to like find something that, as I'm building this up, and it just doesn't work out. Like, no matter what I try. And there's even been times, there was one time not too long ago when I sent an application in and I literally heard God right after I pushed the send. He was like, why did you do that? And I was like, and he was like, you are just trying to make yourself feel better. You are just trying to find comfort because you're not comfortable in this situation. And he's told me repeatedly in recent weeks that part of this is that he wants me to learn to rely on him and learn to allow him to provide for me, that's a whole other story, and I don't want to start crying. So those are examples of these remnants that we are going to be clinging to in this part of the journey that God is just going to be stripping away, because they don't serve you and they can't come with you where he's taking you. And it feels harsh, and it feels like, there's been moments where where I've just been like crying, or I've been really upset, like, what the heck, like, what else are you gonna take? What else do I have to put down, kind of a thing. And it's like quite literally everything. But it's for your highest good, and it's part of the journey, and it's part of trusting him. So then number 14 is this is when you get to complete surrender. So this is like surrender phase 2. And this is when you are starting to check with God on everything, every single thing. You are checking in with him about every decision, what you're going to do that day, what he is leading you to do that day, how he wants you to proceed with X, Y, or Z, all of it. You are checking in with him consistently on everything as much as you can, or as much as you remember to do. And then last is you will shift into full faith, which is moving completely out of the fear state into complete faith, which is literally what I've just transitioned into in these past days. And I'm still kind of acclimating to this, but a part of this comes with like, you get to this point of just like, you've tried all the things, and all the things, if they're not part of the journey, God is not gonna, he's gonna be like, nope, nope, and he will put a stop to it, and it's okay. And then you start to get to where you're like, okay, all right, I don't have any other choice but to trust, so that's what I'm gonna do. And then this is why I say it's surrender phase 2, because in surrender phase 1, you're experiencing this a bit, but you're still very much experiencing paralysis of your fears. Like your fears are still very much paralyzing you. And you may even have certain fears that you have not quite yet realized that you have that are working against you. And so when you get to this sort of second phase of surrender, it's like you have more clarity on what the fears that you may have been like confronting or holding that you didn't realize you were. You get more clarity about those things, and you just get to a point of realizing like, all right, I'm out of my bag of tricks, if you will, is empty. There's nothing left in there. I don't really know what else to do. I've done everything I can think of to do in this situation. And I'm out of ideas, or I'm out of, this or that. And I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of feeling this anxiety and this doubt and this fear. It's not serving me. It's not helping me for sure. It's not like I'm getting answers or insights from that. So then you move into this place of, all right, so what if I just choose to trust that everything's going to be okay? And I choose to continue to move forward in faith. And the difference is you will actually start to just feel that. I don't know how to describe it because it's very new. But I've gotten into this place of just like, I just know it's going to be okay. I just know it is. And I just know God is going to show up like he always does. It's going to work out somehow. So that is kind of the process. Now, this last part is what I've heard people talk about in the past, but I haven't heard many, if any, talk about how the heck they shift out of this, like what kinds of things they did, or to even, how to have people navigated all of this stuff that I just described. Because, I can sit here and give you this list, and at a high level, you might have a sense of these things that I've listed here, but until you're actually moving through it and feel the intensity of these different parts of this whole process, telling you what it looks like is only going to do so much for you. It's when you're experiencing it that, you're looking for kind of what I'm hoping to provide you with this next list of things of like how I got through this. How did I navigate this recent valley that I was in? Because that's the other thing that I've learned in all of these different walks of faith that I've done, is that there's always a valley. You will start off on your path, you will walk on your road, and there are a couple things. One is that the road is going to be laid out before you as you walk. You don't get to see the whole road. You don't get to see what direction it's going. You don't get to see if there's a fork ahead or not, none of that. It's step by step, the road is being paved in front of you as you go. And then you will inevitably run into a valley. It's just going to happen. But what God has revealed to me in this more recent season about that is that you're never alone in that valley. And I know many of us may be familiar with, I believe it's Psalms 23, where it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It's given me a new take on that through this whole thing, is because he's always with you, but he will not necessarily allow you to perceive him being as close as he is when you're in that valley. And the reason for that is because the valley has a purpose, and the purpose of the valley is to strengthen your faith, heighten your intuition, build your own trust in yourself and in your own intuition, and also strengthen your relationship with him. And going back to the past experiences and the past ways that he's shown up for you in your life in the past. So at least from me, that's been my takeaways from when I've moved through these valleys and been in that place of feeling so alone. You have to learn how to find your way out of it. It's just part of this whole process. But I've learned to find comfort knowing that even though he's letting me move through this scary valley by myself, he's still there with me. And you will find the way. He will make sure you find your way. So so there's that. Okay, so what are some of the things that have helped me do all of this? And these are not in any particular order. These are just things that I was writing down as I was reflecting on all of this. So the first thing is drawing from the past. So when when I really feel the burn of all this, it's like I go back to all the other times in my life that God has been there and that God has shown up and that God has gotten me through it. I'm still here today to tell the story, right? So obviously I survived. Obviously I got through all the other things that I've been through in the past. I'm going to come through this by the glory of God, because of trusting him and, really allowing, deepening my relationship with him, and my spiritual practice and my spiritual growth. That is so important. I can't emphasize that enough. Meditation, spending time with God. You can't do this without it. I'm sorry, you just can't. There's no pretty way to put that. So the second thing is to keep track of what God has told you. So the other thing I've been very diligent about in this, I've been diligent about this as I've deepened my relationship with God. Anytime God speaks to me, I will write it down. And I've gotten to a point now where I will go into meditation in the morning with him. And I ask him like whatever guidance I want for the day or whatever I'm praying about. And I will get my pen ready and I'll just sit there for a second and I just let him write through me. Or he will dictate and I'll write as I hear, what I'm getting from him. So keeping track of that, because then you can go back to it. Especially like there was a couple days ago, I was really feeling like, I guess I was kind of in the last stretch of the valley without realizing how close to coming out of it I was at the time. And I had to go back to some of the things that he told me because I was going back to my ego was trying to kick back in with all these old stories and like the fears and the doubts and all of that. And I had to go back to the things God told me. And that's how I drew my comfort and my strength to keep going forward. Which brings me to the third thing I wrote down. Again, these are not in any particular order because if they were, I would put this first, which is to stay close to God and meditate daily, multiple times a day. There's a reason for the saying prayer without ceasing, that verse in the Bible, pray without ceasing. This is why, because it's, and what is that? Is it from Exodus when the manna is the bread of life, and it's referring also to the faith and to the word of God and being close to God. That is what's going to sustain you, and it's also how you're going to be able to perceive and get the guidance. Sorry, my co-host is trying to get comfortable back there, and get the guidance that you need as you're moving along. The next thing I wrote down is to make room for God. So you need to eliminate all the different distractions in order to really, have the discipline and the space for God. And this can be a lot of the things I mentioned when I was talking about how like the stripping away of the last remnant. So in some cases it can be people, it can be places, it can be things that you're doing, that you're kind of wasting your time with, or that you're just doing too much of and not leaving any room for him. And it's creating too much noise to where you can't perceive him. You can't receive any guidance that he's providing you because you're not really spending any time with him and you're not giving him any room. We don't often think about how relationships and different activities, they take energy from us. They take time, they take energy, and they also divert our attention away from God. And so when we're engaging in those things and we're not decluttering some of these things in an energetic sense, there's not enough room for God, or there's not as much room for him. So the more you clear your energy within yourself, so that's like the energetic healing aspect of things and doing the inner healing work, forgiving people, releasing relationships and people that are no longer serving you, releasing and forgiving people for what they've done to you or what they haven't done that you were hoping or expecting them to do. Trying to think of anything I also might be forgetting. Staying in relationships or settings that are not doing anything for you, that reflect really an older version of you and are not like in alignment with where you want to go for yourself. It a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to step away from these things because we feel like we're being selfish or we feel like it's callous or something like that. But not when it comes to your own happiness and your own like what's best for you and your own evolution and growth and ascension. No, it's not. So these are things you have to like really be aware of and open to and surrender, because this is how you make more room for God, especially with regard to the inner healing work. Because the more inner healing, the more you forgive, the more of these heavy negative emotions that you let go of, like anger and grief and resentment and bitterness and all the stuff the Bible talks about. What this is why the Bible is so emphatic about forgiveness, because you cannot have these anger, resentment, bitterness for people or things or whatever, and have space for God and love and grace and the peace. Like they can't occupy the same space. They're like polar opposite energies. So you have to make the room for them. You have to make room for God by letting those things go. And that leads me to the next thing, which is to get rid of stuff. And that includes everything I just talked about, but it can also be literal things. Like what kinds of clutter do you have in your house? Like, what do you have? Like, I know I've done this a lot, especially with like art and craft supplies, like I'll keep stuff forever. Like, oh, someday I'm going to paint that painting. And then like, next thing I know, I don't paint the painting. So, looking around for things that you can get rid of to literally make physical space in your home, because that is also going to help just like clear your mind. It's going to help energetically clearing space to do that. Again, letting go of people, being willing to let go of people that are not serving you, relationships that are not serving you, especially these one-sided situations where, you're the one pouring into the relationship and you're not getting the same back. That's just a gigantic energetic leap. And this is another thing I just learned, is like releasing a lot of these things, agreements I was in with people. There was some situations that, I had made some investments and I just like stepped away from them, like, because I recognized what it was and as difficult, but I was clinging to it because it was like, but I made this investment, like I need to keep doing this. But it was just creating more of these emotions that weren't serving me. And so I realized I had to like just let that go. And it can feel counterintuitive, but when you actually do this, it's amazing how immediately you will notice the changes in your outer reality and how things will start to shift. So places, like I said, and feelings and emotions. I can't emphasize enough the importance of forgiveness. The next one is to learn to change the questions that you're asking in response to what's happening around you, and also learning how to change your perspective. Look at things differently. So for me, one of my biggest things that I've been shifting over the last several years in my own inner healing work and my own mindset work that I've been doing for quite some time now has been the shift out of this victim mentality that I was in for a very long time. So it was like always the question of, why is this happening to me? Why are people doing this to me? Why is it happening? And so when I learned to stop asking that question and start asking, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? What are the feelings that are coming up with this? And when have I felt like this in the past? Why am I afraid of being successful? Like, what is it that I'm fearful of right now that I can't see? And also learning to ask, how is this possibly serving my highest good? How might it be that this is actually for my benefit and for my good? And starting to remind myself that God only ever wants what's best for us and never what's going to harm us. So when you start to remind yourself of that and shift your perspective and ask these different questions, everything starts to change, because your perspective will start to change. And it reinforces this new belief that you're struggling so hard in this season to adopt for yourself because you're so used to this old limiting belief that feels so heavy, which is, why is this happening to me? Why does nothing work out? And now you're in a place of looking at it as, no, everything is working out for me. Everything is working for my highest good. I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to keep going. But you don't yet have as much evidence of that as you do from the things in the past where it didn't work out. So you have to learn to shut that voice down and start reinforcing this new voice and this new way of thinking. The next thing to do is to look at, what are you resisting? Because whatever you're resisting is like your roadmap. The things that you really want to avoid doing are exactly what you need to do. So the things that are scary to you, the things that feel really uncomfortable, that you find yourself procrastinating and avoiding, that's what you need to lean into, and that's what you need to do, because that's like your next stepping stone. So start to embrace those things and start to learn how to like suck it up and get yourself to do those things that you really are feeling resistant to. The next thing is speaking life to yourself. I repeat, speak life to yourself. Do not entertain negative thoughts or self-criticism. You have got to be your own biggest cheerleader in this season. And no matter what, you continue to rah for yourself as you are going through this. Yes, you will have things come up that will make you question yourself, and you might have a moment where you slip and you go back into that self-criticism and negative thinking, and you nip it in the bud as soon as you realize it, and you change the story. You just absolutely do not allow yourself to criticize yourself. Do not allow yourself to go into negative thinking. Do not allow yourself to beat yourself up. You have to like maintain positivity for yourself, maintain positive thinking and self-talk. And then the last couple things are not really, I don't know that there are things I can tell you how to do. I can just tell you that that humility is going to be incredibly important, and you will be humbled no matter what through this process, but embrace it because it's a virtue and there's nothing wrong with it. And the more you allow, like the more you embrace humility, the more you're going to be able to learn and grow and get from the whole thing. And the other thing is resilience. Don't let anything knock you down. Just don't let anything knock you down. Get back up. Yes, you might fall flat on your face, and it might take you a second to get up, but get back up no matter what. And just keep moving forward, and keep reminding yourself that God is going to see you through this. He's seen you through it in the past. He's always pulled through for you, and he's going to pull through again. And then the last couple things I wrote down that I received from God as I was, writing this episode and reflecting on all of this was, number one, the world made you. Okay, like all of these things that you're construct your identity and your outer reality up to this point before you embarking on this process of refinement, is the world. It's all the world's creation and our attachment to the things of the world, whether it's what people think, societal expectations, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, all of the things that we worry about that feel very real. They feel very real. I understand that, but they're all things of the world, and they're all the things that the world is what made you. Walking in faith and going through God's fire of refinement is the process of being crafted by God. And in order to do that, as a part of that process means that all of this other stuff that is from the world is going to be stripped away. It's going to have to be torn down for God to rebuild what you are asking him to build for you. And so it's as hard as it is when you're in that storm and you see the tornado of what used to be your life spinning around you, and you're like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? What have I done? Like, time out, I don't want to do this anymore. You have to stop and remind yourself, like, this is just God tearing down the gigantic mess that I've made over the course of my life by clinging onto the things of the world and my ego and my limiting beliefs and all these things. And he's clearing all that away so he can build it the way that, you know, is in alignment with him and in alignment with my spirit and what he put me here to do. And if that's the case, then it can never be bad. It can never be anything but for your good. And the last thing is to remember that the ego is a product of the world. You must shed the ego in order to walk by the spirit. They both can't, the ego's got to go. And you've got to allow it to go. And that is a painful process. It is a challenging process. So that is what I have for you today, my friends. I really hope that this has blessed those of you who are needing this today, that have been moving through this or are, you know, about to embark on a leap of faith. And after hearing all of this, you might be wondering, like, do I really want to take that leap? And I would say, if you feel called by God to take the leap, take the leap. Because, you know, we see evidence of what God can do all around us all the time. And it can only, you know, it's always love and grace and beauty. And as the all-loving God that he is, he's only ever going to give you and build for you what is best for you, what he knows is best for you. But being in the midst of that process and moving through that process can be a challenge, and it can feel scary. But if you kind of persevere and recognize some of these things I've laid out here and use some of these tips that I've shared that helped me get through it, you will get through it because God will help you get through it. So that's all I have for you today. I love you all. I hope that this has blessed you. I hope that this has helped you. And as always, if you like this podcast and you want to continue the pursuit of faith, fitness, and joy with me, please remember to like and subscribe and share with others who you think would also enjoy this podcast. Or you can also check out my YouTube channel, which is also called Faith, Fitness, Joy. And be sure to like and subscribe and follow that as well. And until next time, I will see you all and hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. And thanks again for joining me in today's episode of Faith, Fitness, Joy.